Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to study the topic how to learn or identify poetry. Now, first of all, let's see what is poetry. Poetry is actually a form of literature which has a structure of a proper pattern of lines and stanzas. The use of language is aesthetic and it is rhythmic qualities which come from using rhyme scheme or meter or imagery and other figurative language. The purpose of poetry is to bring optimism, evoke emotions, ideas, and trigger deeper meanings which cannot be explained in literal use. Now let's see what we are going to study in this lesson. We are going to understand what is the significance of reading poetry. We are going to learn how to identify the structure of a poem. We are also going to learn about the various sound devices like meter and rhythm. Further, we are going to learn about the figures of speech, the use of imagery, and how to explore the latent. So, at the end of this lesson, you will be able to recite poetry with proper intonation. You'll be able to identify and explain the structure of a poem. You'll also identify and quote the use of literary devices and imagery in any poem and explore and express the message as well as theme of the poem. Plus, you'll be able to establish the validity of the title and language in a poem with specific rationale. So let's begin. I'll take the example of a very popular poem which you have already done. So I'll first recite the poem to you. Pay attention to the intonation. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So let us first see what is the structure of the poem, how the meter has been used, and how rhythm has been created. So for identify the structure, you have to see the number of stanzas in the poem, then how many lines does each stanza have, and is there a correlation between these? Is there a pattern? Then you have to see the use of syllables in each line. And lastly, the sound pattern with which every line ends. Let's understand this with the help of example from daffodils. Now if you notice this poem, there are 4 stanzas and there are 6 lines in each stanzas. So the poem has a proper structure. Again, if you count the syllables, you'll see there are 8 syllables in each line. Let's again understand syllables with the help of the first 2 lines. Now when I have marked the syllables, I, wander, lone, lee, as, a, cloud. Similarly, I have split the syllables in the next line. Now, how do I identify a syllable? I have to simply look at the use of vowels. Every syllable can have one and only one vowel. It can have more than one consonant or even without a consonant. Right? The only essential thing for a syllable is to have one vowel sound. So you identify the vowel sound and go on splitting the words. So you can have words like that, floats, which is a complete word but which uses only one vowel sound. So here each word comes out as a vowel. But if you see the word wandered, it uses two vowel signs, wan, aw sound, derd, sound. So therefore it has two syllables, right? Now if you again we take example of the first stanza and notice the sound with which each line ends. So here you will see the first and the third line, they end with the same sound, oud, out. Then the second and the fourth line end in the same sound, hills and dills. And the last two lines, trees and breeze. So what we will do is we'll assign an English letter, similar letter to the lines which use similar sounds, and we'll have a pattern something like this, A, B, A, B, C, C. This is what we call the rhyme scheme of the poem. So every poet uses some kind of a rhyme scheme. So if you identify, count the sounds and see the pattern in which these sounds are repeated, you'll notice that this pattern brings rhythm to the poetry, which is the essence of poetry. It has to have musicality in it. Moving to the next part, to use the language in a very illustrative, figurative way, imaginative way, to create an aura with the help of words. Again, let's understand this with the help of example. Look at this stanza. Here, the poet is trying to tell you something about the visual which he saw when he looked at these daffodils. Now, how do we explain this? Here, the poet, these are some of the figures of speech that you have already done in your classes. Metaphor, which is a direct comparison. Simile, which is an indirect comparison. Hyperbole, which is an exaggeration, right? So here, if you look at continuous as a star, the poet is trying to place similarity of one aspect of daffodils, the layout of the daffodils, with the layout of the stars. So simile is comparing any specific element of any two things. Now if you look at the next line marked in red, 10,000 saw I at a glance. The poet did not actually count the daffodils to make sure there were 10,000. He just uses this expression to convey that there were abundance of daffodils when he looked at them. So this use of exaggeration in poetry is known as a figure of speech, hyperbole. You see the spellings Hyperbole. It's not pronounced as hyperbole, it is hyperbole. Please be very, very careful when you pronounce English words. So hyperbole is using exaggeration to convey the intent of poetry. Now look at the last line of the stanza, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Here the poet has attributed a human quality to the moving of the daffodils in the breeze. That's a very natural thing for any plant to do. So this, assigning of a human attribute to an inanimate thing is known as personification. So similarly, you can find that in other stanzas also. Now here is a mid recap for you before we proceed any further. These are a few questions. I'm just giving you this third stanza to you. You mark syllable in each line and see if you can find 8 syllables in every line. Next, you have to identify the figures of speech only in this stanza out of all the figures of speech that you have done in your class, right? Then you also have to spot the imagery which the poet has tried to create in this poem and explain the kind of effect creates on you. I want this answer to be subjective. The kind of effect it creates on you personally when you read these words. Fine. Let's move further with the theme and tone of the poem. So what is theme of the poem? As simple as what the poet is actually trying to say. That is the theme. And the tone is, how does the poet say it? Whether the poet is happy or the poet is sad or the poet is contemplative, how does it say it? The message of the poem is the theme of the poem, and the type of feelings the poet creates in you is the tone of the poem. Now, if you look at this particular poem, the main message is that nature has therapeutic power. It has the ability to restore your energy, your enthusiasm, and your optimism. If you look at the last stanza of the poem, here it lists out to you, right? For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is a bliss of solitude. Right? So the power of nature is reflected here. That's the theme of the poem. And what is the tone? It starts with loneliness when the poet says, I wandered lonely as a cloud, and then moves to tranquility and eventually ends in ecstasy. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Right? Now, how to explore the hidden meaning in any poem? What you have to do is, you have to first understand what the poet thinks about poetry. Now, here is a quote by Wordsworth himself. When somebody asked him, what is poetry to you? He said, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. Now, based on this, if we see the hidden meaning of the poem, the hidden meaning is that nature is a potent source of lasting peace which can bring you internal happiness. Nature has the power to heal and rejuvenate the human spirit, and this power can be recalled through memory and imagination of human beings. Okay? Now, in the end, we have this assessment for you. These are 2 questions. These are long answer type questions where you have to elaborate the statement. Poetry is about sound as well as sense, medium as well as message, beauty as well as truth. The second question is that you have to comment upon the choice of words made by the poet in the same poem. You can choose any poem from your textbook, right? And these answers have to be objective. You have to think about a universal implication of these words and universal implication of the words, not necessarily on yourself. So, happy learning, and kindly submit your assessments in time so that an effective feedback can be conveyed to you. And have a nice day.